right, thank you everyone for joining the session. So we'll get kicked off here shortly. My name is Jay Bunkaria, Senior Director at Databricks, running our data partnership team. So today's topic will be about accelerating financial insights and innovation with marketplaces. So today in our session, we'll cover a wide variety of topics with our panelists who will introduce themselves in a short minute, covering the challenges in the data industry around financial services, marketplace trends and consumption trends, success stories, and best practices here, among many other topics, and certainly not last but not least, talk about Gen AI as well. So but before we get started, I wanted to provide a little bit of kind of context and background on this topic. And I think there was an interesting stat from Gartner around how data collaboration, data sharing is driving 3 times greater economic outcomes for companies that really lean into it. And this goes without saying for the financial services industry. Data is the lifeblood of this industry, taking your first-party data, but even more importantly, leveraging your third-party data with that to really drive a lot of outcomes. And over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of really interesting trends in financial services around data, starting with traditional data moving into the cloud. Then the big trend of alternative data came about in the late teens and early 2020s, which turned into traditional data after it kind of became more widely adopted. And now we're seeing kind of the forefront of how is data being used for Gen AI applications, how are AI models, the implications of that for third-party data. And with all of these new types of data assets coming, the challenge has been around discovering them, consuming them, and doing that in a simplified way. And so with that being said, last year at our Data and AI Summit, we launched the Databricks Marketplace, which was designed to be an open marketplace for all of your data assets. So not only your data sets, but also allowing partners and customers to share and discover AI models, solutions accelerators, and other types of apps and clean room services here. So really kind of bringing together as a one-stop shop all of these data assets for the providers and the consumers to really easily and more effectively connect. And since we've launched, we've just seen tremendous growth in our ecosystem. And I think this kind of parallels kind of just consumer adoption of Databricks in general. Since we launched last year, we've had 2,000 plus listings of over 220 providers, and we've seen almost 11,000 unique visitors per month on the marketplace. We've expanded partnerships with S&P Global Market Intelligence, and we've had new partners such as StockTwits, in addition to many others, and the logos that you see on this screen here today. So it's been really exciting and fun to partner and watch the growth and help our customers too. So underpinning the marketplace is the open protocol called Delta Sharing, which you heard Matej talk about today. And Delta Sharing is a secure and open way of sharing data across platforms and not being a walled garden. We made some significant improvement and enhancements to Delta Sharing over this last year with the ability to do volume sharing PDFs, pictures, anything that's in the volume storage. We've added foreign catalog sharing, which they mentioned on the keynote today. You can share AI models. And we've also built a rich ecosystem of connectors as well. Recently, we built a Tableau connector. So really making it as easy as possible for end consumers to get data into their platforms of choice. And even to kind of highlight that, you see the number here, 40% of active Delta shares are using open connectors. So really wanting to lean in with our open source strategy around Unity Catalog, Delta Sharing, and just tremendous growth because of that orientation for our platform. So today we've got 3 esteemed panelists here from S&P Global, RBC, and StockTwits to really kind of dive into this discussion and have a really good, engaging conversation. So before we do that, why don't I turn it over to the panelists here to give quick intros on themselves, maybe starting with you, Adam, and then going over.
Hi, I'm Adam Longnecker. I work with StockTwits on their data distribution.
I'm John Sharippa. I am with S&P Global, the Market Intelligence Division, and I work with the Distribution Solutions Group. And we're a traditional data producer, data vendor, and my focus is on partnering to get data out into the market for clients to use.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandeep Ariel. I run data, AI, and research tech at RBC Capital Markets.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for participating. So maybe the first question I want to start with is from a consumer perspective, Sandeep. How has marketplaces been around, and how do they help kind of support your business needs or kind of in the industry as a whole from a consumer and a practitioner perspective?
Yep. So I think we've, like you mentioned earlier, we've grown into a very data-dependent industry. Earlier, getting data from any vendor meant like you set up a file share, you set up like APIs and all of that hassle. Maybe 3 months, if you're lucky, you get that data in, right? And now with the advent of the marketplaces, it's not just one data set, like you can get like 60, 70 data sets, click of a button. That facilitates experimentation at scale, right?
That's yeah. And then so now kind of twisting it to the other side of the coin, right? I'd love to understand from a data vendor perspective, how have these marketplaces kind of innovated to support your businesses, and what are kind of some of the best practices around how you think of them?
Yeah, and when I look at a consumer like Sandeep here, historically, it's a journey. He's on a journey to discover data, to get that data, implemented into his workflows, into his analysis, et cetera. Bunch of years ago, Sandeep and I would spend 6 months going back and forth, right, sharing information around the various data sets. Then, obviously here are the schemas, and here's the FTP, directory where you can pick up that file. Now it's more along the lines of, hey, go to our marketplace. You can basically go, A through, Q in self-discovery and get all the metadata around the data, understand what platforms it's available through, what it looks like, data definitions, and then, say, yes, this is something I am interested in. Let me then reach out and start to have the conversations and do the, and get the onboarding process.
Yeah, and I think I echo what John says. It helps bring you to a different type of consumer, maybe a less traditional consumer. For us, it'd be more like traditional banks, maybe some hedge funds and whatnot. But it allows us to get the data to a broader range, a much larger audience.
Yeah. So when you kind of think about these marketplaces and kind of how they've helped support both the provider and the consumer side, as we think about the trends in the future, where do you see these data marketplaces and these cloud marketplaces evolving over the next 1 to 2 years, given the context of AI in general? Maybe I'd love you to take that one, Adam.
I think where it's going is just with the connectors and the different things you can do once the data are on there. That's what's new. We're not that far from all data being transmitted more or less via SFTP or something like that. So if you're in the cloud by nature, you're kind of ahead of the game. And then just being able to access the data more quickly, structure it differently, flatten it out if you need to, apply your analytics, maybe some NLP. This is all there in the marketplace, whereas before you'd need a larger data team. You'd have to hire them, train them, hope they can do their jobs and so on. This is just more of a log in and get going.
Yeah. Sandeep, I'd love, John.
I was just going to chime in and say something we were talking about outside before the session started in the hallway, right? If you look at the list of providers and the growth that you've shown, right, marketplaces are becoming, very populated with tiles and data sets, et cetera. So, right, we're going to have to rely heavily on AI, on large language models to really enhance the user experience of those marketplaces, to basically do plain language search to discover the information that they're looking for.
I think I view it like it's almost like becoming a digital ocean, right? You've got data there, a whole bunch of data sets. Now people are sharing models on marketplace like Databricks itself. It's no longer about data, right? You can set up more other wave microservices and things that you can interact with this data. Overall, I think it democratizes the data, and it puts the ball back in the court for data scientists and quants to really create that differentiating signal, right? So that's a good evolution for us to have as an industry, to go more towards signals. And there are plenty of regulations around, like if the source of alpha is the data set, you don't want to trade on that, right? So it's a good direction, and data marketplaces and marketplaces in general is facilitating that.
Yeah. With kind of cloud and these marketplaces, John, where have you seen the most exciting or sought after kind of types of data in this new world of AI? Are there any kind of emerging trends you're seeing around the types of data that people want?
Well, we went through the whole big data phase and the alt data phase, and kind of, as you say, some of it's interesting, some of it's a little, or looked interesting at the start, but once you dug into it, it wasn't there. And again, we were chatting beforehand, and we talked about how, foot traffic kind of really didn't, go the way we thought it would, or, even like trying to get into, let's say, like, consumer data, credit card transaction data, didn't kind of see it go, or the privacy rules and everything. I know we'll talk a little bit about privacy in a little bit, but kind of really hinder the real defined use of the data. But where we've had a lot of success is really around textual data. Taking data that's historically been in documents, that's been on calls, or earnings calls, et cetera, taking that data and then making that machine readable and being able to provide it through solutions, feed-based solutions, or type it through a delta sharing type of thing.
Yeah, I'd add to that, simply saying that the text data is becoming more valuable than maybe it was in the past. It used to be you'd simply aggregate text into one signal, and even that signal maybe only worked in one small sector or for a small subset of a few names. Now, when you look at the ocean of text, you can pull a much broader signal out of that. And again, new models coming to the market, ease of access to that creates this new product.
So Sandeep, what's your perspective on, as we mentioned, these new assets and AI models being available on the Databricks Marketplace? How does that support your business from a data consumer perspective, and what's your take on that trend?
Yeah, I think in general in the industry, right? I mean, the availability of these models, it helps us it's how soon can you try out some of these things, see if it works, and the evaluations of these models, like Helm and everything, has its own challenges, right? So being able to access a broad range of models, so something might work really well for a use case which is focused on healthcare, but may not work for a telematics sector, right? So being able to access that rapidly, but also run all of these things in parallel. I think some of the demo that we saw earlier today at the keynotes had these playgrounds where you can really look at 3 different models and see how they are ranking against the same use case, right? So that's really beneficial for us. It creates more transparency. Apart from that, I think these models also come with a large amount of intelligence, right? And if you look at a Llama 370B or even DBRX, right? I mean, there's so much of information that otherwise you would be ingesting 20 different data sets to get that same level of knowledge.
Yeah, one of the things we hear about the Databricks Marketplace is this concept of adding notebooks to the listings themselves to really support the exploratory data evaluation and understanding of the data sets. John, I'd love your perspective on how notebooks help data partners or data providers really drive better revenue or better customer engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a starting point, right? It's basically somebody gets access to a data set. It's how do I start? And I want to say it was 2019, 2020. We built a research application called Workbench on top of, powered by Databricks, on top of Databricks, basically, and provide those notebooks, which really, give you the metadata around the data sets, the data structures, example queries, everything to kind of get you started. And that's kind of was a first step to getting going, and we basically did that at the data set level. More recently, and even more interesting to the point of some of the models and some of the things that kind of Sandeep is saying, we've started to build out blueprints. We started to take research documents and white papers and thought pieces written by our data science team and break them down into workflow processes using the notebooks to basically say, okay, if you want to replicate this piece of research, these are the data sets you need. This is these are the queries that were written and run, and I think that's kind of the next evolution as we advance the usability of the marketplaces.
Yeah, I'd add to that it's still early days for StockTwits on the marketplace. We're relatively new there, but the notebooks have just enabled one to dive right in. We can put an example of here's a great way to use the data just right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So I think one additional thing is that once you have these notebooks and similar things, right, a couple of advantages, right? One is your ability to start experimenting with this data, exploring this data, is super easy. Second is we came from a world where we had data dictionaries and data registries all coming to us in PDFs, and people go back and figure out version 12 versus version 13. It's all digital right now. So.
Yeah, agreed. We all know the days of PDF documentation.
I would say I don't want to date myself in the industry here, but yeah, but I certainly agree 100% with what Sandeep is saying.
Yeah. So Sandeep, I'd love as kind of that data practitioner, maybe zooming out to not just the marketplace but collaboration in general. what are some of the kind of biggest challenges that you're facing when it comes to data collaboration or data sharing more broadly, and how has the cloud or Databricks kind of helped you solve for that?
So I think one of the big innovations that I see that cloud has allowed us to do at scale is data clean rooms. So there is all kind of regulations, restrictions on various industries. There is data that is useful across industries. But being able to create these clean rooms which allow us to aggregate this data in a compliant fashion, that's a key innovation and key scale. I also think that being able to get feedback on your own data sets from non-traditional users, that's a key way for various industries to make sure that you have better governance around your data, right? Along with this whole marketplace scale up, you would see there is a similar scale up in data controls, data governance. We're talking about Unity Catalog. We're also talking about how well can we do accuracy, consistency of data, because now you've got a whole bunch of new users giving you feedback on your data. So I think that cumulatively is a big benefit.
Yeah. One of the things that we've heard in the industry, and John, I love your perspective on this, is around being open and the removal of walled gardens, and really the interoperability and to be able to share data to anywhere that the customer wants it. How does S&P Global Market Intelligence think about interoperability and sharing when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think the greatest thing, right? We keep saying you're going to bring the compute to the data, right? We don't have to transfer it all over the place. And just some of the announcements that we've heard this week with Iceberg, and just with open sharing and the support between Iceberg and Delta Lake across multiple with multiple other cloud and other solutions, is just invaluable to kind of breaking down those walls from a data provider perspective, where I would traditionally have to support multiple deliveries, et cetera. Now that interconnectivity is coming into shape and really helping us as a vendor, really democratize our data. That's what we're kind of all about. And I guess some things maybe that's good for the masses, but maybe some are kind of like, nah, I don't want all this data democratized. I kind of like it in my walled garden.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, in the sense that streamlining access to the data is a double-edged sword. In one sense, you get access to data, you can do more things with it, but maybe the signal degradation is faster as a result because more people see it. So this kind of tilts the scale in the favor of the model. Like, how good is your model as opposed to how good is your data set?
Yeah.
You always need to have always need to have good data. Otherwise,
always good data. Of course, that too. Yes.
What are some of those? That they mentioned obviously getting the data to you. Well, Sandeep, I'd love to understand what are some of the technology challenges that are important for consuming this data and managing it effectively across different platforms.
So I think a lot of this comes down to where an enterprise itself is in the evolution, right? Multiple enterprises may have systems which have their own proprietary data on-prem. There is a lot of alternative data, new data sets, even financial data, which is all coming on the cloud, in click of a button. So being able to federate across that is a challenge. Being able to govern that with the same technologies, that is a challenge. Make sure that data shipments are secure, scans are secure, whether it is for example, you probably don't want any PII information going on to the cloud or going on to any platform. So having the correct mechanisms there. Those are all evolving fields. There's also a lot of some of these data sets eventually connect into systems which are in need of low latency, right? So cloud and low latency is another challenge. I can say from a capital markets research perspective, if you look at a stock like NVIDIA, there are 63 analysts out there who are covering NVIDIA, right? Sometimes your node getting out there first, or at least in the first 10 matters, right? The cloud technologies today may not have that latency to facilitate those kinds of use cases.
Yeah, latency is super important. And so, John, we may have some data providers in the room here, and would love to maybe share some of your thoughts on best practices as it comes to like partnering with data marketplaces or just bringing your data to the cloud and sharing it, and kind of what you've learned on your journeys to kind of doing this over the last few years.
Yeah, as a firm like S&P, we have tons of divisions, tons of data sets. We grow organically the data that we have. We also grow through acquisitions. And so how do you bring all that data together and then make it interoperable for consumers, like Sandeep to leverage it? That's kind of one of the larger challenges that we face, and then coming and then getting it into like an environment like a Delta sharing and everything, and then what's the lift and how do we make that look and how do we ease that client experience, because really we want you guys to get to insights as quickly as possible and minimize the amount of data engineering that you would need to do. So it's kind of working through that, and then how do we basically say, okay, as a large organization, we pretty much probably have relationships with the bulk of the customers that will be, using Databricks or looking for data through, the marketplaces. So how do we work, together to make sure that, we're not bothering that client base and kind of, operating, as a single team versus two teams trying to push the data through.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Maybe shifting gears here a little bit to, privacy and regulation, as we see with Gen AI coming out and a lot of data being consumed into these large language models and other places, there's a lot of data that has a lot of privacy concerns around it. I'd love to get, Adam, your take on, what is the impact of this new regulation and privacy standards for data partners that are looking to distribute and commercialize their data through marketplaces or just in general?
Yeah, no, that's certainly an issue. StockTwits being effectively just a small to mid-sized social media player, privacy is a thing. There's consent from the users that you have to make sure that you have settled. Users, for example, can reach out at any time and say, delete my data. No different than a Facebook or a Twitter or something else. And on our side, we have to comply with that. We've set up systems to do that, and also make sure that the systems then flow through to all of our data partners. So that can get fairly complicated fairly quickly. But it's certainly one of the challenges that we have to be aware of, not only just now, but also where is it going, and how to keep up with it and whatnot.
Yeah. So maybe kind of sticking on that question, right? Like when you think about financial services companies, we're talking about like big hedge funds or any type of investment firm that wants an edge and wants, just give me the raw data, the most granular data. I don't want you touching it or modeling it. How do you balance the ability for them to drive alpha with the granularity alongside, what you need to do to follow the laws?
It can absolutely be a real thing. I mean, ultimately, it sits with us. We don't necessarily need to be pushing through a data set that we don't have that we put any liability on them or us. So we have to make sure that that's not the case. First, that can be masking data, that can be pulling fields, that can be deleting whole things. I suppose moving forward, if people started coming in droves and saying, delete all my data, which is not happening, I don't foresee it happening, but if it were to, your data set gets smaller over time, and that could be an issue. But thus far, the growth of the user base or the message base is far exceeding any requests. In fact, the requests, you can usually count them on like one hand. It's extraordinarily rare for that to occur. But that's still, you have to make sure that you have a good data management policy there, and that you're fully compliant. And we try to do that before even passing any data on, so that what the clients see is completely clean and they can be confident in what they're able to build on there.
Yeah. I mean, Sandeep, you touched on this, but I want to bring this question to John too, is that, in this world of privacy now, clean rooms are an angle to really help support regulated industries of still driving insights without sharing the data per se. How does S&P look at being able to monetize their data or their models more effectively with these types of clean room solutions?
Yeah, and I think it's the privacy that the clean room offers. That's the benefit for us as a provider, and for Sandeep as a consumer. build a lot of models internally to sell, to whether or not it's to provide scores or sentiment out there to the market, or it's to solve some type of internal problem, like linking companies together between data sets. We know that, our clients have those same issues, and providing those solutions out to the marketplace is something we want to do. Clean rooms, allow us to have the exchange of, Sandeep's data with our model, right? Privately, and we're not seeing what he's sending in terms of questions to a model or list of companies to do linking, et cetera. And also our model is protected underneath because it's not, the data itself is not exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to add on that. I think for the financial markets, most of the time, the most important thing is a thesis, right? I mean, what is your hypothesis, right? And that's something that you don't want to share because that is MNPI, or material non-public information. With the clean rooms, this is where, like John said, right, you can still get very aggregated, anonymized views or even insights on the same thesis without really sharing it, right? I mean, that just makes the advice that a firm would give to their clients much more robust, much more data-driven than it is today.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now coming to everyone's favorite topic and one of the biggest topics of this conference around generative AI, right? And maybe I want to start with you, Sandeep. Where are you seeing now, and where do you see in the next 2 years real applications of generative AI in the industry and to support to kind of to businesses like yourself?
Yeah, I think we're seeing like quite a bit of Gen AI when it comes to information and knowledge processing, right? So financial industry relies a lot on news information, press releases, earnings calls. So there's a bunch of LLMs out there which are able to summarize this, and there's an information overload out there right now, right? You don't really know what is. There could be 10 pieces on a company, and all of those 10 pieces could be similar, right? LLMs today are able to differentiate that and summarize it and say, here is 10 pieces which are similar. Here is the 11th piece which is a slightly different hypothesis, right? So that allows us to process information which is much more broader. At the same time, there is also a lot of things like earnings calls, right? I mean, people spend a lot of times on what happened during this earnings call, what were some of the questions, right? So being able to get key summaries of that, being able to interact with past earnings using LLMs, applies extending that to central bank announcements. Almost everything now can go into LLM, and you're spending 1/10 the time that you would have spent earlier to process these things.
Yeah, it's just driving a lot of efficiencies for companies.
100%.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? And it's making everyone's workflow more efficient. And just think of the earnings call example, right? A few years ago, it was a PDF document. You took one home, maybe if you were commuting, you're on the train, you took your data mining tool called a highlighter with you and maybe read it and kind of highlighted it through. And then we started to make it, take these PDF documents, make them machine readable, provide the text, be able to, run models against it to effectively look at multiple documents at once. And now where AI and the models are taking it, right, is that you can build co-pilots or chatbots on top of it and ask specific questions to pull sentiment, to pull different pieces of information out. And that's the evolution, right? So, and I think it was from a provider, is how do I make what I have a lot more AI ready as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think pulling, obviously we're a sentiment shop, but sentiment can be very important, but it can also be very difficult to extract out of the data, especially raw text. And now with the models the way they are today, not only can you do it more easily, but you can simply ask a question of the system and immediately get some sort of a result back.
So maybe to kind of flip the coin in terms of on the data provider side, right? We probably have some data providers in the room here. You're seeing this with publishers in the media space, and how are you guys thinking of the impact of generative AI in terms of protecting the IP of your businesses and pushing this data into models? And what are your concerns, or how do you think of the mitigation strategies of that in your business?
I mean, may the best model win. We try to focus on just providing the right sentiment signal, the right sentiment data, and providing more there. Most of that comes from a richer user experience for our folks on the platform, and that creates that in turn creates more sentiment and more inputs to a model. So I'm interested to see what the models are able to do, because the data is not going to change. The historical data is what it is, and we may be able to create more data, which just gives more degrees of freedom to the model to effectively do more things or perform better. So I'm curious to see.
But to that point, like if the model sucks in your data and then it has it and it's used it to train itself, are you concerned that your IP is gone or unprotected?
It might be, but I think it comes down to the specific use case for the end client, and that can vary for us. I mean, some people are just an overly active trader wanting to know where the action is. Some people are wanting to know, hey, scan my portfolio and figure out where the pain points are.
Yeah.
What do I need to be paying attention to that I don't? So I think completely there's a wide array of uses even today, and that will continue to grow as the models get better. So I'm less worried about the data being. I mean, data is going to be democratized. I think that's going to happen. So it's just a matter of how do you keep up in terms of either providing more data or a different type of data that helps drive better insights or just improves existing ones.
Yeah. Here's where I'm going to disagree with Adam a little bit, right?
Go for
it. Yeah, the data is our asset. It's basically I can protect at all costs. And I see, some folks from my team out there kind of, smiling. And I know we've definitely adjusted over the last couple of years as, the use of data, data driving model use cases have evolved over the last couple of years and accommodating. But, we really are protective about, our data getting outside of, let's say, one of our consumers' four walls, right? We obviously want him, Sandeep, to use the data to, build his workflows, build his models, make his life much more efficient. But we want to make sure that our data does not get out into the public domain, because there are data assets that we have. Let's say CompuStat financials, which goes back into the into the 60s. You can't replicate that data. So that's again, it's for us from a licensing perspective. We look to protect it at all costs.
Yeah, therein lies the difference between private and publicly available data. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for the time. I know we're out of time here. I really appreciate it. It sounds like we had some really good discussions on the legal implications of AI with data sets, how clean rooms can be used, and how you can help discover and facilitate end consumers. So we'll stick around for a little bit if anyone wants to talk or have any other separate questions. But thank you again for your time and coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.